If the missionaries and evangelists oppose the Quran, because the glorious Quran says, فَمَنْ يَأْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَى وَمَنْ يَأْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَى. Then shall anyone who has done an atom weight of good shall see it, and anyone who has done an atom weight of evil shall see it. That means you will be judged according to your action. And if this is what they oppose, then they ought to first oppose chapter 7 verses 1 to 3 of Gospel of Matthew, wherein Jesus Christ says, you shall be judged in the manner you judge others, and you shall be measured in the manner you measure others. And if they oppose the Quran, because the Quran says, لَهَا مَا كَسَبَتُ وَلَكُمْ مَا كَسَبْتُمْ وَلَا تُسْأَلُونَ إِمَّا كَانُوا يَأْمَلُونَ, they shall get reward for what they did, and you will get reward for what you did, and you will not be questioned for what they did. If this is what they oppose, then they ought to first oppose chapter 18 verse 20 of the book of Ezekiel in the Bible, which says, the one who sins is the one who dies. The father shall not be punished for the sins of his son, nor son shall be punished for the sins of his father. Righteous person will get reward according to his righteousness, and wicked according to his wickedness. How come when the Bible says these things, it becomes the words of God, and when the glorious Quran says, it turns to be the words of Satan? And if the missionaries and evangelists oppose the Quran, because the Quran commands us to pray by touching our forehead on the floor, then they ought to first oppose chapter 26 verse 39 of Gospel of Matthew, wherein it is stated, Jesus went a little forward and fell on his face and prayed. They ought to first oppose chapter 7 verse 11 and chapter 11 verse 16 of the book of Revelations in the Bible, which says, the elders went a little forward and fell on their faces and prayed. If they oppose the Quran, because the Quran commands Muslims to say Insha'Allah, if God will, before stating anything which they intend to do in the future, then they ought to first oppose chapter 4 verse 15 of the book of James in the Bible, which says, you ought to say, if the Lord will, we will do this and that. And if they oppose, because the Quran commands Muslim women to cover their heads, then they ought to first oppose chapter 11 verse 6 of 1 Corinthians in the Bible, which says, women should cover their heads or be shorn. How come when the Bible says these things, it becomes the words of God, and when the glorious Quran says, it turns to be the words of Satan? And if the missionaries and evangelists oppose the Quran, because the Quran prohibits drinking liquor, then they ought to first oppose chapter 6 verse 3 of the book of Numbers in the Bible, which says, "Be away from strong drinks and wine." And if they oppose the Quran, because the Quran prohibits eating the flesh of swine, pig, then they ought to first oppose chapter 14, verse 8 of the book of Deuteronomy, which says, "Do not eat the flesh of pig, nor touch its carcass, as it's unclean." If they oppose the Quran, because the Quran prohibits lending money for interest, then they ought to first oppose chapter 6, verse 35 of Gospel of Luke in the Bible, which says, "Lend money without expecting anything." And if they oppose Muslims because we say, "Assalamu alaikum," may peace be upon you, while meeting or greeting others, then they ought to first oppose chapter 24, verse 36 of Gospel of Luke, and chapter 20, verse 21 of Gospel of John, which says, Jesus greeted people saying, "May peace be upon you." As a matter of fact, there is no reason why Christians should feel offended with the glorious Quran. On the other hand, they ought to be grateful to the glorious Quran, because many of the teachings of prophets, including Jesus alayhi salam, would have disappeared into oblivion if they had not been mentioned in the glorious Quran.